And then there's good stuff.
You're watching WVIC Cleveland, serving Westlake, Lorain, and all of Northeast Ohio.
The following program is a production of WVIZ-TV Cleveland, making the difference for you.
I have distinct memories of climbing aboard a streetcar on Madison or on Detroit, and for 10 cents going downtown, which was a great deal in those days.
There used to be matinees at these theaters, 10 cents that only cost you. And you'd see a double feature, coming attractions, and a comic.
We really enjoyed Euclid Beach Park. And, of course, the Candy Kisses and the Humphrey popcorn balls. Humphrey's had, I don't know, a special way of making that stuff.
Well, the tree at Lindner's was just so tremendous because Sterling Lindner's, we used to go up to about the 4th or 5th floor and look down on it, and it was so impressive to our little kid. I mean, it was just unbelievable.
Still on the board. Thank you.
Every Friday for the past 13 years, Doris Belovich, Janine Seifols, Laverne Lentz, and Marianne Catholic have been meeting at the Tri-City Senior Center in Middleburg Heights. They play some bridge, they share a laugh, and they reminisce about the Cleveland of days gone by.
We could buy a double-dip ice cream cone at Cookta's drugstore for a nickel. But if we wanted to really stretch it, we would get one dip for 3 cents, save the 2 cents, and then my dad would give us a penny so that in a couple of days we could get another cone. Really. But steak was 3 pounds, round steak, 3 pounds for $1 at Kroger's, which was across the street from our barbershop. Bread at Sadowski Bakery was 3 cents a loaf. I remember that distinctly, homemade hot bread.
I remember at that time there were many, I suppose maybe now you'd call them bums, but they rode the rails. And very often for Sunday dinner, one of those men would be at our table. My mother, we didn't have that kind of food, but whatever was on our table, my mother and dad shared it with one of these people,
My father used to make wine and root beer and beer. And if he didn't do it right, you'd be eating in the kitchen and you'd hear pop in the basement because the bottles are exploding.
Every Sunday we would have to go visit our relatives on the east side, and we'd get all dressed up with our hats and our gloves and our little purses, and my mother and dad would take us all the way to the east side. Now that was hours. You'd have to take like 3 or 4 streetcars, and you had to get a transfer to go from one to the other. We'd go way out to Collinwood. Now that was pretty far.
Streetcars. Today you'd have to visit a museum like Trolleyville, USA in Olmsted Township to ride one. But back in the 1930s and 40s, they were the last word in transportation. The first electric streetcar hit the streets of Cleveland in 1889. And by the height of their popularity during the Second World War, most everyone was riding the rails of the old Cleveland transit system. As Clevelanders went about the routine tasks of their everyday lives, the old streetcars welcomed them with the kind of fine craftsmanship that is rare in today's age of fiberglass and plastic. Artisans at Cleveland's G.C. Coleman Car Company crafted the walls and handrails out of rich cherry wood. The streetcars featured bouncy rattan seats and fare boxes with a little stool nearby for the conductor. But collecting fares wasn't the conductor's only duty. Each conductor was also responsible for stoking the coal stove that heated the streetcar.
And my father tells a great story, one of his favorites. In as late as 1949, He had a gentleman visit from outside Cleveland who got off the train at the Pennsylvania station at East 55th and Euclid and took the streetcar from there down to the terminal where he worked. And the gentleman got off the elevator and my dad was standing there and he had kind of a startled look on his face, and my dad inquired as to why he was looking like this. He said, "Did that streetcar have a coal stove in 1949? All the other cities had gotten rid of these things years before, and the Cleveland transit system soldiered on with these old coal stoves, and they finally ran their last in 1951. My memories are mostly of the early 50s on Euclid Avenue when I would go down in Christmas time with my mother to Sterling Linder Davis to see the big tree, and we would always take the streetcar. And to her, the tree was the big thing. To me, the streetcar ride was the big thing.
Blaine Hayes fell in love with trolleys as a boy, and the study of Cleveland's streetcar system is his life's passion. So I guess it's no coincidence that he works for the RTA. He recently published a book on the history of Cleveland's transit system.
There were things about the cars. There were aromas, there were sensations, there were sights about the old trolleys that are missing today in a aluminum fast-paced bus that rushes along a freeway. And it just takes away also the people thing of getting together with other people in the morning and having conversations, where in a private automobile you miss that.
When you talk about streetcars in Cleveland, there's probably no topic that comes up more often than the subway on the second deck of the Detroit Superior Bridge. The last streetcar ran through that subway in 1954, and the tunnel has been sealed up ever since. But to this day, Greater Clevelanders fondly recall riding through those subterranean tunnels near Public Square on streetcars that are now just phantom ghosts.
And I have distinct memories of climbing aboard a streetcar on Madison or on Detroit or on Clifton, and for 10 cents going downtown, which was a great deal in those days. And I remember how those cars used to shake, rattle, and roll down the street. And when we got to the high-level bridge, we would look through the windows down at the Cuyahoga Valley, the Cuyahoga River, and just in my mind, I wondered, well, what on earth is holding this bridge up if I can see through down to the river?
Another thing that used to happen all the time was the high-level bridge subway had ramps that led down into the subway, and people would drive down in there constantly at night because they couldn't see. They didn't realize that it wasn't paved, and they would be driving on the ties and going up and down like this. So they were, the Cleveland Transit was constantly pulling with a crane. They would be constantly pulling cars out of the subway portals. So those were some of the things that happened in those days that were just part of everyday life in the 30s that it's lost today. You don't see it.
Another thing you just don't see today is kids catching a free ride. But it was a common sight back in the heydays of the Cleveland trolley system.
See, streetcars used to protrude in the back a little bit, something like a bumper. And then sometimes they'd have another coach where they could hook on. But when they have another, you could stand on that buckle there. We catch that streetcar and ride all the way as far as we could go.
Yes, kids used to have all kinds of adventures on the streetcars. A favorite experiment for many young boys was pulling the trolley line off the overhead cable to see exactly what would happen.
So to prove that indeed the trolley was actually powering this car, we had to pull the trolley off the wire. So I was running through Lakewood quite close to my home, and just started up, and a number of us got behind it and pulled the rope, and the trolley came off the wire, made all kinds of sparks. It scared the bejeebers out of us, and the car stopped. And therefore I knew for sure that that's where the power was coming from.
Streetcars were a fixture in every Cleveland neighborhood for the first half of the 20th century. So what led to the demise of the cheery yellow trolleys? One theory involves a decision made by a General Motors executive in 1925. The story goes that this executive wanted to find a way to boost automobile sales. And so General Motors bought up railway companies throughout the country, determined to dismantle the streetcar industry. But that's only part of the story.
there was also the factor of economics. The maintenance of the rails in the street, the overhead wires, was very expensive. Along came a bus which had no rails, which had no wire, no need for substations. It carried almost as many people. And instead of buying new streetcars and refurbishing the railway system, they just decided to go cheap and buy the buses.
So in the early 1950s, one by one, the streetcars were replaced by modern buses. And on January 24th, 1954, Cleveland's last streetcar ran down Madison Avenue. And when it brought its passengers to their final destination on that cold winter night, it also brought with it the end of an era.
Well, we had a nice home on Washington Boulevard, a bungalow right near Cottage Grove, but in those days there was no such thing as natural gas heat, and we heated our home with coal. And I have a very clear memory of the coal delivery car frequently coming into our driveway on Washington Boulevard. We had an opening, a chute on the driveway, in which the coal would be shoveled from the truck down the chute with a cloud of black smoke that was all over the place, and it would wind up in the basement of our home. We take it for granted now. All you do is to raise the thermostat in your home, and it's nice and warm and comfortable. But it wasn't that way. We didn't have any thermostats there. You couldn't control the heat by a thermostat. The only way you could control it was by shoveling some more coal on the fire and all the things that brought about. So that made it a pretty exciting experience. And frequently the same company which supplied coal in the wintertime supplied ice in the summertime. Very few, if any of us who lived in Cleveland Heights had refrigerators in those days, had electric refrigerators. We had ice boxes. The Iceman was a strong man who had tongs, and he had an ice pick. And he would go to each of his customers, find out whether the person wanted 25 pounds or 50 pounds or maybe even 75 pounds or 100 pounds. And then he'd go back to his ice truck. He'd take off the tarp which covered all the ice to keep it from melting in the summertime, and he'd take his pick, he'd pick out the appropriate size of ice, put his tongs on it, and put it over his shoulder. He had a leather thing he wore on his shoulder because otherwise the ice would be darn heavy and cold on his shoulder. Put on his shoulder, then he went up to the customer. It was at that point that I and a few of my other friends would always trail the ice truck around, because in the process of using that ice pick to cut off the piece of ice that he needed, he always left some slivers of ice there. And we'd love to grab a sliver of ice and to suck it. That was our popsicle without any flavoring, I guess you might say.
When we were all a good deal younger, Christmas time wasn't just a hectic few weeks of dashing from store to store to find the perfect gift for Aunt Flora, or racing the clock to get the holiday cards in the mail before the first of the year. Instead, through the dreamy innocence of a child's eyes, we saw the holiday season as an enchanted and magical time, a time filled with secret whispers, sweet anticipation, and joyful surprises wrapped in glittering silver and scarlet. And for most of us, the bustling excitement of Christmas time was capped by a traditional journey to downtown Cleveland to see the city decked out in her holiday finest.
I remember every year at Christmas time, we lived on the west side, and we used to take the rapid transit downtown, which at that time was called CTS, and we used to go over the Flats area and come through to downtown at the bottom of the terminal, and we'd walk up the terminal to go Christmas shopping, and all the windows would have the little figures moving back and forth and going back and forth and everything. Now, always the last stop was Higbee's, because it had the Twigby shop where the little kids could go in, and they had a whole area we could shop by ourselves. They had a little door there where only small children go in and shop, and we'd go and get our presents wrapped, and we'd take them out, and our parents would never know what we had, and then we'd have like a secret for Christmas to take home.
Higbee's, I might say, used to have this little restaurant, the Silver Grill, on the 10th floor, and it was quite an event for the children to go down there, because they used to serve little chicken dinners in stoves.
When we wanted to marvel at a breathtaking Christmas tree, there was only one place to go, and that was the old Sterling Linder store.
Well, the tree at Lindner's was just so tremendous because Sterling Lindner's, we used to go up to about the 4th or 5th floor and look down on it, and it was so impressive to a little kid. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And the huge ornaments that they had on it were special. They had great big balls and clowns and things like that.
And no downtown Christmas excursion was complete without taking the elevator up to the Winter Wonderland on Halley's 7th floor to pay a visit to Mr. Jingling.
He was a storyteller, and he would tell all these different stories to the little boys and girls, and he would be the key holder, and he would always have this key, this big ring of keys, and he would give it out. He would give the kids a key.
And each year the key was different, and what you could do is take it home and put it on your Christmas tree, and year to year you'd have these memories of going downtown.
Dan Burnett is the manager of the Penitentiary Glen Nature Center in the Lake County Metro Parks. For months now, he's been planning a special exhibit that will recreate the Christmas magic of Halley's 7th floor.
These window dolls greeted many, many people as they went downtown, and they saw their wonderful, fanciful, decorated holiday windows at Halley's. These windows were actually, they started to design them back in May, and it took them about 6 months to create these windows, and they debuted. They opened up the curtains the day after Thanksgiving, and many children, so that's what I remember, is going downtown and looking up at the window and just imagining what you're going to get for Christmas. The doorman's hat we have is actually from the doorman. His first name was Ernie, and it didn't matter what walk of life you were from, you would always be greeted with a smile by Ernie at Halley's. He would open up the door for you and welcome you to the holiday season. Christmas is what but memories. People used to flock downtown to see Halley's, and the Mr. Jingling character brought people there. And I believe that from the people that came to the exhibit last year, the outpouring of their emotions and their past memories and their stories, people like to keep the past alive. And that's what Christmas is. Christmas is made of memories, no matter how old you are.
I'm Mr. Jingling, how I tingling, keeper of the key. On Halley's 7th floor, we'll be looking for you to turn the key.
Cleveland Memories will continue in a few moments with a look back at the national air races, the old movie houses, and much, much more.